Welcome to the Custom Built with JR podcast. I am JR.
And I'm Coy.
And we're here today to do another frickin' podcast. So, we have three types of podcasts. We have guest conversations, World of JR updates, and Q&A. And today, Coy has decided that we are going to do a Q&A. So here we go. Question
Number one. What's the difference between having goals and not having an end goal? How far does having an end goal take you compared to having no goals at all and kind of taking it day by day?
So how does having goals positively or negatively affect how you do things? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, pretty much. That was badly worded.
Well, if you have goals, you know, even if they're not like a full-blown life goal, you know where you're going. So as opposed to trying to make a goal or figure out where you're trying to go along the way, like if you have a specific destination in mind, every decision that you make prior to that, you know how to make it because you know where you're trying to go. But if you don't have a goal, then every decision that you have to make, you have to just kind of wing it based on whatever the emotions or, you know, the wind direction is that day because you don't know where you're going. So if you know where you're going, then you know how to make decisions to get you there. But if you never have thought far enough ahead to have an established finish line or goal, then you don't really know how to make decisions. It's the same reason that anybody would want to have, you know, a set of like core beliefs that they believe in that allows you to make any sort of moral decision based off of, you know, and those are the kinds of things that people don't necessarily like put on paper. But I think that stuff is really good to do because of the fact that then you have a litmus test to make every decision off of, as far as like, you know, a moral litmus test to make decisions by, and also a sort of path litmus test to make decisions by, where you can say, ultimately, you know, if I go down road A versus road B, which one is going to take me closer to the goal? And do they both abide by my core beliefs? You know, do they violate any of what I think is the right thing to do? And as long as they don't violate any of your core beliefs, then you know, okay, well, if road A takes me closer to my goal and road B doesn't, then I'm going to go road A, you know. But if you don't know where you're trying to go, or you haven't made that up in your head, then how do you make that decision? You just kind of wing it, right? And I think being purposeful in life is a huge tool. And frankly, there's a lot of people that if you ask them what their goals are, they can't tell you, or they're so
broad.
Loose. What's that?
Broad.
Yeah, they're so loose about their response that you can tell 9 times out of 10 they haven't put any time into really like getting clear on what that is. But clarity is extremely powerful because, you know, once you're clear about where you're trying to go, then again, every decision you make leading up to that, you know exactly how to make it. But if you don't know where the hell you're going, then how do you make any decision? It's just based on a whim at that moment, mostly on emotions at that time, typically, which is not good.
So how specific do you get with your goals, and where do you put them?
So I just use my notes function in my phone for like everything, but the ideal goal is so clear that you can like hold your hand out and see it in the palm of your hand, you know? Ed Milet talks about when you like visualize your goals, you zoom in, you zoom out, you change the color, you see it from a different angle. You know, all those things are done to enhance the clarity of your goals, vision as you practice that. And it coats that neural pathway in myelin, and as it does that, that makes that memory, that glimpse, that picture in your brain easier to pull up. So that's kind of like the brain science behind how that works. So the more you practice that and hold it in your hand and turn it around and make it change color, and you know, constantly just evaluate different things about it, that makes that just that much more clear in your brain, and it's easier to pull up. So like when you're going through your day, you know, there's another thing called the RAS, the reticular activation system, that Ed talks about a lot. And so it filters out all the stuff you see in a day. So when you look at anything, your RAS, based on the thoughts that historically have went through your brain and what you're kind of searching for, your RAS filters through what you see to kind of fit what you're looking for. So for example, if you're going through, well, Ed always uses the example of like, let's say you buy a black Ford Power Stroke, but you never had one before. Let's say you had a gray Chevy Cruze before that. When you had your Chevy Cruze, you're driving down the road, black Ford Power Strokes don't mean anything to you. Well, all of a sudden you want to get yourself a black Ford Power Stroke. And now there's the same amount of Ford Power Strokes that are black on the road, but now you're going to notice all these. So because you're like, oh, I really want one of these, now all of a sudden you're going to see these left and right, when before they were there, but they just didn't stand out. So that filtering system works together with your visualizing process to then essentially bring those things out to the front as you navigate through a day. So, you know, if you know you need sales and you've been just thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it, anything that comes up in a conversation that might sound like an opportunity to make a sale, boom, that's where your brain's going to go. If you're thinking bad thoughts all the time, the same works in that direction, you know? So if you're constantly just saying, oh, you know, my life sucks, you know, what's the next thing that's going to go wrong? Well, then you bet your ass the next time something that doesn't maybe go exactly right happens, you're like, oh, there it is. Yep, you know, that I knew something bad was going to happen, because you're looking for it. You know, your subconscious mind is trying to fit what has been going through it this whole time, you know, historically. And so if it's bad or good, that's going to be identified. So, you know, here again in the conversation of getting to a goal, it's like you have to make all these things work together to see opportunities so that then you can act on them. So that's like then the preparation meets opportunity thing. But it all starts with visualizing and having a crystal clear goal so that everything that you see in your day winds up being seen as an opportunity, which then you would need to take action on to move you towards your goal. But if you're just a wandering generality with no specificity, what are you looking for? Who knows? It's just whatever's floating through your brain at that time. You know, again, you need to be purposeful about all these things so that you can identify opportunities that are going to take you closer. And then as long as you act upon them and do the right thing, then you're going to keep moving closer every day.
Do you, I guess, is there ever a time you make an emotional decision over a
Hell yeah.
thought through factual decision.
Yeah, I
In
do a lot
business.
less than I used to, though. You know, when I started the business, something weird flipped in my brain because I had worked around people in the trades my entire life, and most of them were like the stereotypical, like everybody just yells to get points across and throw shit when they're mad, and the bad stereotypical stuff that you hear about. That's basically what I grew up with. So I knew that, especially for people our age, millennials and whatever comes after that generation, that is just like, it's really not tolerated. And tolerate isn't the word that I want to use, but that's just what came out, and it does make enough sense to get the point across. They just don't want to be around that, So I just knew that shit was not going to fly. Like, that was just not going to work if I wanted to keep people, which I did, because ultimately I wanted to build a company that had a bunch of people so that we had something worthwhile where in our little town we made a difference. And then as time goes on, in the state we made a difference, in the country we made a difference, in the world we made a difference, But you can't do that without having people, and if you get them in the door, ideally you want to keep them. So that shit doesn't work. So yeah, I forgot the question.
Emotional versus thought through factual decisions.
So yeah, I mean that pretty much sums up the answer. Like that wasn't going to work, and that answer mostly revolves around like dealing with people and reacting to people, because I think that's where most people struggle. But on the business side too, you have to keep your wits about you, and you can't make decisions just in general across the board in high emotion times. You got to like sleep on it from time to time. Now, the thing with that is, though, there's a lot of situations where the situation can be dealt with a lot better if you make the decision and deal with it properly in the moment. So especially when you're coaching people, if you don't already have it, learn to have the emotional maturity to react to a situation calm, cool, collected, and clear. That's always the best, because especially again in a coaching situation, the situation is live before you, and it's most applicable and addressable in that moment, where it's like, hey, this is what you're doing, and this is how it's making this person feel. So let's get this person over here. Hey man, let's get both people together. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to work through it. That's assuming that it's not some big, huge problem, because then you would probably let everybody get their space. But let's just say something is said, for example, that the person that said it doesn't realize definitely came across wrong to the other person. So let's say we'll use an example here. Joe and Bob. Bob has been working on a project for the last 2 weeks. Bob's pretty new. Joe's been here for 4 years, and so Joe knows what's going on. Bob's pretty new. He's trying his best, but he doesn't know as much as Joe because he's only been here for a little while. So Bob's been working on a project for, the last couple weeks. He put a lot of work into it. Bob's a go-getter. He wants to do good things, as basically all people do. And Joe can see from a mile away, though, that as Bob is explaining what he's been doing, it's wrong. And this is a situation that comes up a lot. And it boils down to EQ, right? And so Bob's going to be explaining to Joe that, he's been working on this project. He did this, this, and this, and he thinks it's going to work great. And Joe says, well, I don't know why the fuck you do that, because that's never going to fucking work. And so now Joe has completely deflated Bob's balloon, which was not necessary at all to give constructive feedback here. But Bob is ultimately going to come to Joe, who, let's say Joe was his supervisor and tasked him with the project, right? Bob is going to come to Joe with his best solution for whatever the problem is. And so when he does that, Joe can't just poo-poo on Bob's efforts, because now Bob's not going to want to come to Joe with stuff anymore. And now Joe has created a wall that he may or may not be able to realize is there, and is going to prevent Bob from grabbing the bull by the horns down the road and coming to Joe with suggestions. So then, and this type of thing has happened, then I'm going to hear about this through, Billy, who is like, oh yeah, well, Bob was really excited about this. He told Joe about it, and I guess Bob's pretty upset now because Joe poo-pooed all over Bob's efforts. And so then I'm going to say, oh, okay, that's not good. That immediately registers in my brain as a problem. That's the whole reason that I walk around the entire place every morning, to get a pulse on how things are going. So I'm going to go up to Bob, and well, if Joe is Bob's supervisor, first I'm going to go to Joe and I'm going to ask Joe what happened, and he's going to tell me, oh, in his words, it'll be like, yeah, Bob had a terrible idea and da-da-da. And then I'm going to go to Bob and I'm going to ask Bob, hey, what happened? And Bob's going to say that and say his piece. And then I'm going to figure out what really happened, which was ultimately that Bob needs some help, but he came to Joe with what he thought was a good idea, and Joe smashed it to pieces. So then I'm going to go to Joe and I'm going to be like, Joe, this is as soon as possible here. Tying it back to the question. I'm going to be like, Joe, so are you aware that when you reacted to Bob's suggested pathway here, that when you said what you said, that made him feel completely deflated? Like all his efforts just went right out the window when you said that, and now he's going to be much less likely to bring you stuff in the future. Are you aware that is what happened? He's probably going to say, no, I'm not. I didn't realize that happened. And that's because he missed all the body language cues and he just reacted in the moment, right? Because he has enough knowledge to know that whatever Bob's idea wasn't going to work, and that's fine. But that's his opportunity to coach Bob up so that Bob can take his position someday, and then Joe can take the next one above that someday. But he blew it because he made a rash reaction to what would have otherwise been a great coaching opportunity. And now we got to bring these two people back together, and I'm going to say, yo, you need to fix this, like now, And so Joe's got to go over there and say, hey, Bob, you know what? I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to smash your idea. That wasn't my intent. I didn't mean to make you feel bad about coming to me with that. And I really hope that this doesn't prevent you from coming to me with great ideas in the future. But I just need you to know that in the past, when we've tried this, this, and this has happened. And that's why I'm not sure this is going to work. But have you thought about this, and this? Because I think if we added or subtracted these couple things, we might be able to get this to have some legs. And as a matter of fact, why don't we try that, and I'll do it with you, and then we'll see what happens, and then we'll take it from there, And that's how you can fix that stuff. But I've seen those things start like that and then turn into a pissing match and then be left alone for a month and just get worse and worse and worse. And the next thing you know, somebody puts in 2 weeks, all because somebody reacted poorly ultimately. And that shit happens a lot because people don't have enough EQ to understand the things that they do and the ramifications that they have because they didn't put enough thought into it, or they're just not very attuned to other people's body language. That stuff is huge. And if you catch it quick, you can save almost every opportunity. But if you let it fester, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and people's walls and egos are going to get higher and higher and higher, and then you lose people, all because of silly stuff like that. But I have been there plenty of times, and a lot of times it takes a removed third party to come in and address the situation and kind of mediate, But going back to your question, dealing with that as soon as possible is always the best. And again, that's why I walk around both buildings every day to talk to people and say, hey, how's it going? Because then I'm listening to not only what they're saying, but more importantly, watching their body language as they tell me what's going on. And I can pick up not every time, but a lot of times I can pick up on if there's some underlying stuff that's going on. They're never going to tell you the first time, but that's the opportunity to then, say, hey, you mind taking a walk and, go outside and check this, thing out, and hopefully you can have a purposeful thing to, kind of lead into a conversation about, but then you can just, have a person-to-person conversation on like, hey, to be honest with you, I walked by you this morning and you just weren't yourself. Is there anything going on? And a lot of the times it's like the first, second, third time that you ask the question in a different format where they might start telling you what's going on. But if you just walk up to people and be like, yo, is everything good? They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear, which is yes, and then you keep pushing. So in a leadership role, it's always our responsibility to go in and analyze the situation and really pay attention, especially body language, because what people say and what's actually going through their head is very, very commonly not the same.
So when you have a conversation with Joe and Bob, that's in a different room, kind of behind closed doors.
Always.
The
only time you ever reprimand somebody in front of other people is when they disrespect someone else in front of other people. That stuff has to be squashed right then and there, which again, it's a superpower at that point if you have enough emotional control to just read the situation as is and not blow up back at them, because that's not the idea. But if in that example, if we're in a room and somebody is sharing in a similar fashion, let's say we're in a team meeting and somebody shares their idea and somebody goes, that sucks, like from the peanut gallery type of thing. Mm-hmm. That type of thing has to be squashed right then and there. So it's not where it's like you're mad and you're like, is that what you say? Like, you can't say that. You're not going to yell at the person in the room. But what I would say, let's say that actually happened right in front of me on my best day when I have my crystal clear, vision and brain capacity, bandwidth, and I'm, the world hasn't gotten to me. If that happened right before my eyes, I'd say, hey, what are you doing? That person just put all this time into explaining what they thought would be a good idea, and you think it's okay to just pipe up like that and say that their idea sucks? What better idea do you have? And as a matter of fact, I don't even actually want to hear what better idea you have. I want to hear this person out, but I can't because you just interrupted them. Now I suggest you sit back down so we all could listen to whatever Bob, in this case, has to say, because I actually thought that it was great. I really like this, and this about it. I like nothing about your reaction. So sit back down so we can hear Bob. Bob, please continue. you would want to smash that very publicly right then and there to make sure that that does not happen again. I've never had to do anything like that because nobody, we don't hire people like that. But that's the only time where you would ever want to publicly reprimand somebody, is if they do something publicly to humiliate somebody else, then they need to share in the repercussions very publicly, because that needs to be made an example of.
So being Bob in that case, how do you, when somebody says, something like that sucks, how do you just keep talking with confidence after that? Because I think I'd struggle with that. Just keeping going with whatever your idea was. Even if, the owner says, you like this, this, and this, I think I'd still struggle with sharing the whole idea confidently.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's the whole reason that, if it was Joe that piped up in the back, that's why we had to really address that. But at that point, from my standpoint, I would try to help Bob through, and if he was really shooken by what was going on, then I would kind of just take over and regain the meeting and help make the point of whatever it was intended to be, But I don't disagree. I mean, a lot of people don't like to talk in public at all, and then to have all that go down and then try to regain their thoughts and keep going, that would be really rough. And that's one of those things where, here again, it's like a superpower to have the clarity of thought to be able to step by step work through a situation like that, because you have to just kind of, like on Happy Gilmore, where they're like, play the ball as it lies, wherever they kind of wind up with, or whatever they wind up with, you got to take that and just go with it, because you're still having a meeting for whatever the purpose of the meeting was, and you need to get the point across one way or the other, so you need to finish it out. But you wouldn't want to keep putting pressure on Bob to finish their thought. If I'm reading his body language and he's just completely shut down, then I'm going to help make the point in the meeting, and then I'm going to pull him aside and say, Bob, I'm sorry about that in there, and I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen again through talking to Joe after this. But I just want you to know that I really believe in what you're saying. I really appreciate the fact that you had enough courage to stand up and share your idea in the meeting. And I really hope that you can find it within your power to do this again. And we'll try it again in another 2 weeks in a smaller setting. And, I'd try to, if that really busted up their confidence, I try to do little things that I know they could accomplish to help build their confidence back up.
So after that, what happened, there'd kind of be a thing going back and forth between Joe and Bob, right? How would you deal with that?
You have really good questions. So we have core values, and the reason we have core values is to tie the resolution to situations to a set list of standards that everybody goes by, so that that ultimately we have, just like the goals, a litmus test of, is this the right thing or the wrong thing to do? And so in that case, let's say be confident in what you know, but open to new ideas was one of the core values that I would cite. PMA would be another one, positive mental attitude. If Joe, let's say, was all resentful, which he likely would be, I'd give him a little space after the meeting for a while, and then I'd come back and we would have a talk about it, and based on his reaction, that would tell me what the next step is. But let's say that we went and he said, you know what, yeah, that wasn't the right thing to do, I'm sorry. But then the next day, you could definitely pick up some weird energy between the two, and he was being, pissy, so to speak. I would be watching for that for sure. And I would say when I went up to him and I saw that was going on, Joe, how's that PMA today? And we would try to get a conversation going around that. And if he didn't address it, then I would pull him off to the side. As far as if he didn't fix it, I would pull him off to the side and I would say, hey man, you know, we've all moved on from what happened the other day, but I can see that your energy is still carrying this along and you've got a bunch of residual feelings about this. And we're going to need to move past this, or we're going to have to do something different as far as, you know, you can't be here if you're going to have this energy about you, because you're killing the PMA of everybody in the department. You're making this weird for everybody. And, you know, Dave Ramsey says to be unclear is unkind. And that is true. So, like, that's the point where you just have to spell it out and just say, Joe, look, I know what happened the other day was like, is bad. Now it's kind of awkward, but you're going to have to get through this and move on just like the rest of us have, because this is making it super awkward for everybody in the department. Everybody is sensing the weird energy here. And we're all forgive and forget kind of people. So we've moved on. I need you to move on as well. I know and expect that you'll grow from this and not do that again. So if that is indeed the case, then let's just move on from this and make sure the PMA is where it needs to be. Because if we can't, that's going to be a huge problem. And I can't have you here with that attitude. Period. So that clarity, and you don't need to serve it out there in an ultimatum like, yo, you better knock that shit off or get the fuck out. Like, again, that's the stuff that I used to hear in the past, but that's like an emotional reaction to an emotional situation. You need to approach it calm, cool, collected, and logical, you know? So you need to work through that. And like you said, I would be watching Joe really close, because you're going to expect that that's going to go on. And I would expect it to go on for a day or two, you know, and I would kind of let it run its course. But if it's more than a day or two and there's still this crazy weird energy and they're bringing everybody else down, that's when I'm going to, you know, definitely correct it. But you can't not, because again, to be unclear is unkind. And so if I'm just not saying anything, then that tells him that it's not really wrong to do that, and he's going to keep doing it. Now he's ruining everybody else's experience because of it. So,
okay, my last question. It's a little bit of a flip back to the first question, and it's the importance of conveying your vision for the company with the entire team. How, I know at the beginning of the business that you didn't do that as much because, you know, you didn't really have as clear of a vision at that point. So what's the difference between then and now, where even in like the weekly everybody in the company meetings, we kind of go over that every now and again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely try to do it at least like once a quarter. I probably should do it more. But again, especially, you know, our company's pretty new ultimately. So we've been around for, you know, 5 years. A handful of people have been here for that entire ride. A lot of people have been here a year. They all have very unique experiences from their time here, because like last year, there was new machines landing like every other day. The place got a big addition, and there's just new tangible things all the time. So that's why when this year started, I explained to everybody like, hey, this year is going to look different. All the improvements are going to actually be processes, procedures, and we're going to make this place run like a Swiss time watch. Because last year was all like the physical, tangible stuff. Now it's all the intangibles that are really going to take us to the next level. And, you know, because everybody was around during different times, what you see commonly is people are really excited for a year. And then if you don't keep that vision of where you're going exciting, then you're going to see that excitement dwindle and dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. And one day they put in their 2 weeks. Now there's a line between, you can't have people that have to have like crazy excitement all the time, because they're just, you need to have consistent people that, can operate autonomously. But it's our job as leaders to, have a very clear vision and then convey that vision to everybody so that they can see how they fit inside of that. And so ours being, we're continuing to grow into these new buildings, and then we're going to consolidate into one gigantor building behind the current one. And I point to some tangible things that we're doing to get ready for that. That those little things planted in people's brains, along with, and this is what it means for you, as far as when we get that building, then we have new opportunities for you, and we're going to have a walking track around the building and a gym inside of it, and all these things that tie it to them specifically and their family and what that means for them. That gives them something to look forward to, because everybody needs something to look forward to. And here again, what you're ultimately trying to achieve is where everybody knows where we're going, so they're making decisions. Every decision made along the way is made in the manner that I mentioned before, which is like, you have road A, you have road B. Road A takes you closer to the goal. We're gonna all pick road A. It doesn't matter who you ask at the company. We're all gonna pick road A because we know where we're going. But if me and the management team are the only people that know about the vision, then we're gonna pick road A. But all these little smaller decisions that are made by everybody on the team's level, well, they might pick road B because they don't know where the hell we're going. So it's our job to make sure that they know just as clear as we do where we're headed, so that we're all making decisions and rowing the boat in the same direction. Because it's the, if you've ever actually went on a canoe, especially, if you row harder on one side, you're going to go in a circle. And so if you got half the people rowing, one way and half the other way, well, then you're going to sit there and spin in a circle. But if we're all rowing in the same direction, then we're going to get there, and we're going to get there twice as fast, and frankly, twice as easy, because everybody knows what we're doing and they know how to make decisions. So that means that your job as a leader becomes easier because you have less stuff that's kicked up to you to decide, because your team knows how to do it.
So when you convey the vision with everybody in the company, do you find that more people have bigger goals for themselves after that?
I try to work towards that. The biggest thing that I found is the barrier there is trust has to be earned to even have that information shared with you. So I've always said that you need to do 12 like super good things for someone before they might think that you're actually looking out for them. In the situation that I'm really addressing there is if you're in a like supervisory or management role for someone else, a lot of people, especially people that have been in the workforce for a while and have enough negative experiences with people that don't give a damn about them, they take that into their new job, right, wrong, or indifferent, and cast that assumption upon the people that they now work for. So, there's been, most of the people that work here have had other jobs. And so, frankly, a lot of them have had some pretty nasty experiences that you learn about as time goes by. And some of them are subconsciously assuming at some point that they're going to get hosed again. And while you can't hire people with too much of that, I do think that the reality is that a lot of people kind of look at life like that. You know, they're at least on the defense to make sure that they're not getting hosed, which you can't fault them for. So being that you're in a position where you could take advantage of that and, you know, not do right by them, you have to go that much farther to show that you're really looking out for their best interests. And so where if they were meeting somebody that wasn't their supervisor or somebody that couldn't, you know, eat on a daily basis, be in a position to take advantage of them easier, like if it was somebody that was more their peer in the same position, you know, that trust would be earned between those two people easier than it would be to have the earned trust of the person that's their manager, just because they know that it could be misused easier. So if you're their manager, or if they're, you know, if they report to you in some way, shape, or form, you have to go way farther to earn trust. And so I just picked the number 12 because it's big enough to drive home the point that, like, you have to one, be willing to go out of your way to earn that trust with no expectation of anything in return until, you know, after a while. And it's still not really an expectation. It's just a hope that at that point you'll have earned it. And once you've earned their trust through, you know, truly earning it, because they now know that you really give a hoot, then they'll share more about their life with you. But until you earn that, they're pretty guarded about that stuff because, you know, why should they share it? Because they don't honestly trust you enough to think or be certain that you're actually going to help them. So why would they share it if they don't actually think you can or want to or will help? So trust is the number one thing that has to be established in order to get to that point where you can really dig into what they want out of life. But then when you get through that, you can tell when the vision has landed, because then they'll start including themselves in that plan, and they'll start asking questions that, if your RIS that we were talking about before is tuned to listening for that, you know, listening for interest in what we have going on here, which mine always is, because like a big part of my job is putting butts in seats, you know, the right butts in the right seats, so to speak. You know, when they start asking questions like you do about, you know, hey, well, what about this and what about that? And you can tell they're trying to put the pieces of the vision together in their head, like the puzzle, to solve it for themselves and figure out where they fit in the puzzle. That's when you know that stuff is working, you know. And it's not like a trick, like you're not tricking them. It's you need to have a vision that you have well thought through, that you know, are going to deliver, not plan to deliver, and then put it out there in a way that paints a picture of what that means for them and show them how that is going to make their life better, you know. And if you do all those things, then you'll see them start to take interest, and that's when you got one more person pulling just as hard as you, and it gets way easier again to row the boat in the direction you're trying to go, because now all those decisions are being made just like you would.
That's my final question.
Awesome. You ask really, really good questions. Honestly, I didn't anticipate some of those, but they're really good and really applicable questions. And again, I can tell that you are vested in the mission and what we're trying to do here because of the questions that you have. And I can tell that you're going to do really good with the information because of the questions. Like the whole no such thing as a dumb question, you know, you always try to approach it that way, and you don't do what Joe did to Bob and just like make somebody feel humiliated because they asked a question. But people's questions tell you where they're at in a lot of different ways. So the questions that you're asking, again, are very indicative of somebody that really understands what we're trying to do. And so I like to try to take as much of my time as possible to address those things so that you become clear, and it actually comes around to enhance my clarity too, because as I'm thinking through my responses and stuff, you might ask me questions about things that I hadn't thought of in that way, and then I have to address that in my head to give you an answer. So it all creates extra clarity. Teaching, there's a saying that I always kind of cite, which is teaching comes back around to teach twice. So it teaches, the person that asked a question, but not only that person, but the teacher as well. And I found that to be definitely true. And it makes me want to come out of my sort of introvert shell and have more of these conversations, because it makes a huge difference in how much people understand what's going on, the decisions that are made, how much enthusiasm people show up to, their career each day with. I've seen it not work, and I've seen it work. And when it works, man, that is an awesome thing to see, because you can feel it in the air, man. Like you can feel, and looking back on the times where like life was great, and then it was also a struggle at other times, like you can feel that in the air. And when everybody's rowing in the same direction, and we all know what we're doing and what we signed up for, and we're working towards it together, that is something that you can't put words to. It's the best thing about business. Absolute best thing. So yeah, great questions. I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you very much for tuning in. I would ask that you hit the subscribe button if you got something out of this that you think is useful. I hope that you did. And like I said, if you did, hit that subscribe button. We have much, much more to come. Have a wonderful day, everyone.